Hello there, Mindshakers.
Welcome to another episode of the Mindshack podcast.
This podcast has been developing and growing beyond our expectations.
And we would like to thank you for your continual support.
That's all. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to Season 2, Episode 8 of Mindshack. Mindshack is a Gen Z podcast that focuses on discussing societal issues, entrepreneurial leadership, and borders on topics in psychology for Africans. Please do check out our relevant social media at mind_shack_, mainly Instagram, where you get most of our updates for our podcast. So, today's episode, we'll be talking about youth and Africa. So we'll be breaking it down into three main topics: peer pressure, the drug crisis, and body image. I have a lovely co-host today, Mr. Shane. Would you like to introduce yourself?
What's good, guys? You know it's Kwesi, Shane. I prefer Kwesi, but I'm just excited to talk about what it means to be young in Africa.
And today we have Miss Matabo. How are you? Can you please tell us why you are part of this podcast today?
I'm all right, thank you. Wow, why am I part of the podcast? It sounded interesting, and I kind of stalked your social media, so I was just like, finally. But yeah, excited to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. We are as excited as you to have you as our guest. So guys, let's get straight into it. We're talking about the youth of Africa, and the first thing that comes to mind is, who are the youth? What age group are we? So according to the World Health Organization, the youth in Africa starts from the ages of 15 to 24. And I actually thought it was 35 for some reason, but it's actually 24. When I think about, firstly, the drug crisis, I want to think of it in an African context. So what drugs are holding young Africans, hostage? I can't help but to think of nyaupe, of glue, those are the prominent ones in South Africa. But Kwesi, what are some prominent drugs that are holding the youth hostage in the countries that you live in?
I've lived mostly in Ivory Coast, so that's West Africa. And if you check it out, mostly it's, lean or weed. So those are the most consumed drugs. The hard drugs are not there yet because, they're pretty expensive in general. So in countries like in West African countries where most of the population can't afford them, weed is easily accessible and, as I said, lean as well.
All right, well, I think lean is a problem. It's a problem. So Matabo, my first question to you is, who do you think mainly influences the youth in Africa or in African communities?
I don't know. I think there's quite a lot of factors that come into play, but I think also our surroundings play a huge part. So you can't really point directly to one person and say that they influence the youth. But I think that we learn heavily from the cultures around us. So our parents, our grandparents, especially with things, our friends. So especially with things like drug crisis, I'm from Lesotho, and weed is a big thing here. And it's one of the few countries where it's actually commercialized. But from a high school level, it's around you, it's everywhere. So you're not really taught about the dangers of it, but then you start to learn from your friends, maybe your cousins, and you kind of just decide not to do it. A lot of times people use it as a gateway drug to actually go into cocaine and everything else. So I can't say that there's like a specific person or a specific demographic that really just influences the youth. But I think we just pull from different sources just to, kind of set the pace of how we deal with drugs and how we interact with them.
Amazing. Kwesi, what's your views on peer pressure?
So yeah, being young in Africa, first thing my mom always talked about when I became like a young adult, she was like, don't go follow your friends if they're doing dumb. Don't fall in the trap of peer pressure. How do you think that peer pressure is influencing the African youth?
It's insane. I think, especially in Lesotho, we live in a culture that's very collective, right? So we like to be part of groups, we like to interact with people, and this is not always in the best settings. And because of so many different people from different backgrounds, economic, social, you tend to mix with a lot of people, and sometimes you do get pressured into things that you don't really want to get pressured into, right? Um, as you said your mom was like, don't follow your friends. It's very hard not to do that here. If you're trying to be, part of a collective or part of friends. So you just find yourself in situations that sometimes you have to go get burnt. Like you have to go get burnt badly. We have this thing where you say we have to go see for ourselves. So it gets very insane or intense sometimes. But lately, I think people are becoming a bit more individualistic and true to themselves. So it's not as deep as it was before. But we do have cases of peer pressure where it even leads into a life of crime. Um, it can lead to harassment, like from very young ages. So it's something that parents are trying to really keep tabs on, but some aren't doing or some aren't able to.
You were talking about how peer pressure can lead to a life of crime.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you believe that peer pressure can be good sometimes?
It can be good in places like maybe the school environment. Sometimes it can motivate you to do better, but you can only look or you can only be influenced by other people so much without knowing how to stand for your own. And you can't base your validation, you can't base your actions on what other people are saying for too much, like for too long, especially with it leading into crime. I do know a few people, maybe at first it was good for them. So in school, maybe they were pressured by the youth around them, to do well. But then they started cracking under the stress, and it leads to drugs, it leads to crime. So it's also drawing boundaries with the people around you, and just understanding where you're at and where you want to be, but also understanding that you can't build a dependency on how other people view you.
Absolutely. And, just touching on peer pressure again, you guys spoke of it in a school context. And I think there's different types of peer pressure, right? There's like actual bullying, like, you have to do this, or, I'm going to beat you up or something. But then there's unspoken pressure, where you feel influenced, and just because of insecurities, or just because you feel like you need to do it to fit in, not necessarily because someone is telling you to do something, but because it's happening and it's kind of like unspoken, right? So just to jump into the next question for you, Matabo, is regarding like the strictness of the parents and everything. Besides that, actually, why do you think the youth resort to drugs? Why do you think that's an option?
I think there are different things to it. The way life is set up for some individuals is that is their coping mechanism, that's what they interact with on a daily in their neighborhoods. And sometimes they aren't able to go to school. They feel like, as you're saying, peer pressure is building up. They're just, slowing down in what conventionally where they should be conventionally in their lives. And they just start to, use that as a gateway. But I also think that experimenting is dangerous. When you minus out the economic backgrounds, when you minus out social groups, sometimes you find that we're just curious. We're curious human beings, And as I said in Lesotho, weed is literally in every street corner. You can smell it in the air just walking out of your house, And you might want to experiment with that, and then, it gravitates to something else. And before you know it, you're on the heavy stuff. And sometimes the youth can't really backtrack, or sometimes you just want to keep going and going and, trying it out. Not everyone has a point of return,
I really believe that. But do you think that maybe some drugs, let's say weed, as you were talking about in Lesotho, with it being almost commercialized, do you think it should be legalized?
Okay, I think it should be legalized. And being in an environment where it is legalized for commercial use, I have seen the possibilities that are there. But then at the same time, I think it has to be very well regulated. So within Lesotho, there are some legislative and regulative issues around legalizing weed. But when you look at other countries like I think Canada, Amsterdam, and so on, you kind of see how that economy has really, helped the economy. So you start to think, why can't you do this for other countries? But I also think that even within regulating, it's also about sensitizing the community and how to interact with it. And some people will say that weed is a heavy drug. Some would say it's a soft drug. Some would just say, listen, it just makes me mellow and it's whatever. So I think understanding how to interact with drugs and, the dangers behind it and being aware of it as a community and, teaching the youth about it will actually make processes such as legalization a bit easier.
You see, considering, cannabis and weed in general, it's quite popular in the Western culture. So to what extent do you think the West has an influence on Africans in terms of drugs?
I think the West has a very heavy influence on the African culture and how we perceive drugs. And, you can't ignore it. A lot of these drugs, other continents, right? And on top of that, it's also in the media. We see things we perceive on social media. Growing up, personally, I thought drugs were cool. I thought if you worked a high-powered job, you would be sniffing cocaine, you'd be a Wall Street girl or a Wall Street guy. It all seemed so cool until you start to realize the negative impact of it. Because you would see people in your community, like I would not understand why some people are on street corners, haven't showered for days, and why they aren't, in the best state. But I wouldn't understand that whatever drug that they were on was probably having the same effect in Western countries, but because I would see the I don't want to say glamorous side of it, but the more acceptable side in quotations of the drugs, I couldn't quite understand the influence that they had, and it took trying to understand where all the drug crisis started from, reading about drug crisis in different countries. Then I realized, oh, okay, guys, this is not actually cool. Like, it's not cool to do drugs. So yeah, I think there is a heavy influence from the West on how we perceive drugs and how we perceive drug abuse in different countries. And I think even then, we still do need to take accountability as a society. Drug abuse is not something that we discuss in our homes as much. It's not something our parents really talk about. Well, African parents. So we also need to take responsibility in not being able to educate or failing to sensitize our kids, our nephews, and people around us about the issues.
Right now, we're going to a quick break. This break is one to say thank you. Thank you to you, our listener, for your feedback, for engaging with our podcast on our various social media as we work to improve and incorporate it. We urge you to continue to do so as we set sail. Thank you very much. We hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
You're absolutely correct in terms of the glamorization of the West in terms of drugs. That's why I believe most of the youth in Africa are influenced, because it looks so pretty. Like you said, you wanted to be part of Wall Street, the Wolf of Wall Street and stuff, because it's so glamorized and it looks so, posh, it's a rich lifestyle. But yeah, it's quite interesting views. Thank you for that.
Well, I think my next question is it's related to what's it called, body positivity, because even though talking about weed is interesting, that's not all we're going to do today. But in your life, as someone who grew up in Lesotho, what were the issues that you saw with body positivity in your community?
Body positivity and body image. Someone doesn't sit you down and say, this is how you should view your body, or this is how you should, interact with your body. I think for me, I'm a big girl. I always say this. I've always been big. It is what it is, I didn't understand what body positivity
was, especially in Lesotho, you will get comments, there's a word called stutla, and this is to describe a big girl or someone who's just, big. And this is, and when you're young, a 6-year-old, every other day you're hearing that, matter with the stutla type of thing. At first you start to really think it's a negative thing. I always hated the word. I was always like, why are you calling me this thing? This is not nice. Because then, someone would call you that and people around you would start laughing. But then I think there's like a threshold that you cross when you're a bit older where you learn to interact with body positivity. You learn to be a bit more conscious of your body image. And that's where you start to decide whether what people are saying can negatively impact you or in a positive way. But the way, for example, the Lesotho culture is set up, you go from being a stutler to when you hit puberty, now just being looked at in ways that you don't want to be looked at, maybe your body develops a bit faster, or you look a bit older, so now you just get attention that you don't really want. So navigating it is very hard because no one really walks you through it. No one really guides you through it. You just have to learn from the media, from how people interact with their bodies, from conversations with your moms and your sisters, how to start loving your body, how to start viewing your body.
I definitely understand what you mean because I was a big kid as well. And I think, I'm from Burundi and the vibe is kind of the same. It's all about the big kid, Kwezi the big kid, and all those they like pinching the stomach. That's what they do back home. So the cheeks, hey, that's what they enjoy doing. And luckily, my parents always made me feel comfortable, so I never really stressed about it. I think maybe growing up, I found a little more conscious. Being young. As we said, we're influenced by the Western world, and you see the image of a teenager as a young, tall, strong guy. So I wasn't that in the beginning. So I'm pretty happy. But I'm pretty happy my parents always made me feel comfortable.
Hearing you guys talk about this is also bringing me back. I relate to both of you guys in terms of body image. It's something that I've struggled with for most of my life. I don't think you can even get to a point where you feel 100% content about yourself. So it's an ongoing process. And just, talking about South Africa, for instance, I feel like South Africa is known for curvy women and stuff. So I'd kind of ride on that, be like, okay, at least I'm curvy, and I fit with the image. But what I found was a problem mainly, especially in South Africa, and I'm sure in many other African countries, is the fact that bigger girls were kind of sexualized by older men, and it kind of made them grow up in that instance. So I think that's the true problem, in my opinion, in terms of body image. But Matabo, for you, do you think that Africans are well represented in terms of body image? So do you think that, I'm not even talking about just shape, I'm talking about skin tone as well, do you think we are well represented?
A quick answer would be no. I don't think we are well represented. I think, yes, the world is starting to, incorporate the different African, I don't want to say, skin tones, body sizes, and so forth. But it seems like there's always some type of pushback, as you said, just backtracking about the sexualization of curvier girls, especially within South Africa, right? There is this thing where with the body positive image movement, there's a specific body type that you will see on billboards or that you will see on social media, even with the bigger girls, the curvy, big bosom, there's a specific body type within the plus size community, and you find that also, much as it pushes boundaries that were set before, doesn't really represent the whole spectrum. I would say, what about the girls who are big but without big boobs? What about the girls who are big but without big bums? you know, or dark skin, you know. And there's always some type of pushback. It's like we're saying, listen, we're being represented, so maybe we'll sit quiet in a corner about why some body types, even within the community, are not being shown. And even the same, I think there was an argument, or there was a bit of a conversation on Twitter a few weeks or months ago about body positivity and exactly, you know, what the body positivity movement looks like. And I remember a lot of people would just say, nah, big girls are being represented in the media, and obviously body positivity is not only fixed to plus size women, but that's what we see as the extreme, or that's what society sees as the extreme. Because when you see maybe leaner women on billboards and all these other things and in the media, you don't really try to take note of, okay, how's her body, how's her skin type, how's this, how's that, you know. But then when it goes to the spectrum of bigger women, you know, there has to be that curve, there has to be that bosom, there has to be, you know, a specific look. And even with skin tone and skin color, I think that a lot of things are, not a lot of things, but I think people are becoming more and more aware of the need for representation and are pushing for it. But then it has to be introduced, and this is my opinion, it has to be introduced in a specific way. So it has to be really extreme. Who would have thought Miss Universe would have short natural hair and would be dark skinned? You know, you have to see it in extremes, but you don't see it every day. So even having to see it at the most extreme end is like, okay, but can we see it every single day? Can we see it when we page through a magazine? You know, there shouldn't be that one, I don't want to say unicorn, but there shouldn't be that one pinnacle. And then everyone else, every other day, we see the same thing over and over.
You're absolutely right, and I love that you brought up the conversation that was had on Twitter, because I was kind of looking at it as well. And you know, when you look at it from being a big girl, from that point of view, you know, you don't really sympathize with the people saying no, but I want to be a part of it and stuff, because you know your own personal struggles. And I'm not trying to demean and say other people don't go through struggles, but it seems like you said, we are the extreme, or like, you know, bigger girls are the extreme of, you know, of the spectrum. But just looking at body positivity as a movement, do you think that other people are allowed to participate and ride on that wave? Because I think that's what mainly the Twitter debate was about.
I think everyone can and should, and you know, it's up to them if they want to participate, because at the end of the day, everyone has, or I'd like to think that majority have a specific insecurity, or they have something that they're not comfortable with. And that's what body positivity is. Body positivity is just loving the skin that you're in, you know? And I don't think there should be guidelines to say that, oh, okay, this is when you qualify to join the movement, you know, this is how you should look. But I also think that we need to be aware of the privileges and the biases that already exist within society, within media, in terms of the body. You know, if you're loving yourself, great. If you're pushing, great. But understand, maybe if you represent a more, I don't want to say society friendly, but a more accepted body type, you know, and understand that some people, you know, live in their skin and in their bodies that aren't universally accepted, and that's fine, you know. And I think body positivity is not some exclusive clique, but even when you're staying, okay, I don't want to say staying in your lane, but even when you're understanding what you're working towards loving, understand that maybe sometimes people need to be a bit more vocal. People need to fight biases. People need to, you know, scream, you know, advocate, put it on Twitter, put it on Instagram, for them to truly, you know, walk that journey of body positivity. And it's also about allowing everyone to just, you know, enjoy their bodies, man. Like,
if there's one thing you can't leave is your body. You came with it, you're gonna die in it. So you might as well, make sure that while you're in it, you're enjoying it and you're loving it.
Definitely, I agree with that. It's all about loving yourself, actually. Where we are today, with all these things happening in the world, and being young, just at least love yourself. Do you have any advice for the youth? How would you advise anyone that's between the age of, let's say, 12 even to 18 currently, that wants to start loving themselves?
I would say, personally for me, if we're going back to body positivity, it's still a journey. So I think anyone within that journey, just stay true to it. Love yourself. Sometimes you need to have tunnel focus, tunnel vision, canceling out the noise and just saying, I'm knowing myself, I'm knowing my body, I'm knowing what I like, I'm knowing, how to interact with it, and it is what it is. And I think just generally for the youth, I just say, cancel out the noise, focus on you, focus on what you're doing. Even when exploring, know your boundaries, and work towards knowing yourself, before you let other voices come and mold you into what they want you to become.
Thank you so much, Matabo, for those last sentiments. And just to echo what you're saying, it's important for the youth to, first of all, recognize what their triggers are, recognize their insecurities, recognize everything that affects you, and deal with it in the healthiest way possible. Avoid ways that will keep you in spirals. And things that keep you in spirals are things like drugs, are things like literally self-hate, because now you're adding voices to your head saying that, okay, I don't look like this person, so that means I'm ugly and stuff. And then it just becomes a whole spiral. So I think it's important for the youth to start instilling healthy coping mechanisms. And basically, I was reading up somewhere, it's like it's important to speak good about yourself. We always are cautious about how we talk to other people and talk about other people, but it's also very important how we talk about our own selves. Thank you so much for listening to this episode on Youth and Africa.
Wow, you listened through to the end? Thank you.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at mind_shack_.
And if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform or all of them.
There's going to be more exciting episodes to come.
So, see you on the next one.